Hi, welcome to Oma's Kitchen.
Oregano.
Today we're going to make a Gasthaus meal. The inspiration for this meal came from the Gasthaus for the little village we lived in Germany. They kept goats and made their own goat cheese. You could go over there in the evenings and they would offer a dish of roasted vegetables with goat cheese broiled over the top and some crusty bread on the side. My own interpretation of that will be a Kalamata olive bread that we're going to make first. We're going to kind of get this dough going before I cut up any of the vegetables. Tonight we will have the fresh Kalamata olive bread. We will have roasted vegetables with goat cheese over the top, a fruit tray, and I've got some fairly cheap Riesling here, which is actually very good for the price. And we're going to have that. So this is a very German meal. The inspiration for this came from Germany, and it's going to be like we were at a Gasthaus tonight. So let's get started on the bread first, and then we'll work on the vegetables. I have my half cup of Kalamata olives here. They're pitted, but they're whole. So I'm going to actually show what I do. I usually quarter them. So cut them in half, and then cut them in half in the other direction. This size is a good size to include in the bread. You have to like olives, but oh my God, if you like olives, this is the most wonderful bread. We used to go down to that Gasthaus. Now I want to explain what a Gasthaus is, if you've never been to Germany. Most good-sized villages have their own little pub in the village. Usually it's run by a family that actually lives there. It's called a Gasthaus because they usually offer at least a couple of rooms to rent. So anyone coming through that area can stop there. They can get a decent meal. Usually it's very fresh stuff that came right out of the surrounding area. Usually there's a little cafe and bar on the ground floor. Our village had a Gasthaus where their daughter was allergic to cow's milk, so they kept goats. And they would use the goat's milk instead, and then they learned how to make different flavors of goat cheese from that. It was so good. You could go up there. They had a little refrigerated case where you could pick out a flavor of goat cheese if you wanted. And then they would include the goat cheese in some of the things they offered on their menu. That was one of my favorite meals, was to go up there and have a beer or a glass of wine. A little pile of roasted vegetables that they would run under the broiler with the goat cheese on top. Goat cheese has a lower fat content. It doesn't melt the way like cheddar melts. If you've never tried it, I recommend it, particularly if you like strong cheese flavors. And then they would offer this crusty bread on the side. Now their bread wasn't olive bread. We love this bread recipe. Their bread was just this little baguette of crusty bread. And I don't know if you've ever been to Germany, you'll know the bread is excellent there. So I'm going to include these olives in my loaf of bread here. But I wanted to explain what a Gasthaus is. And it was very nice to be able to walk up there any evening I didn't feel like cooking. We could just walk up there and enjoy a very nice homemade meal. Now that we have our Kalamata olives chopped up, we're going to actually put together the dough, and we're going to let it rest for a couple minutes so that the yeast kind of gets started. What we're going to put in here is 1 packet of active dry yeast. In there. We're going to do a mixture of all-purpose flour and bread flour. So, about half and half. This is a 3 cups of flour recipe. So we're going to do 1.5 cups each. That's 1 cup. That is half a cup. So it's 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Put that aside. We're going to do 1.5 cups of bread flour. And if you've watched my other, my French bread recipe, I explained the difference. Bread flour just has a slightly higher protein content, creates a stronger gluten bond inside the bread, so it makes a crustier bread. We're doing a combination of both because we want it a little bit crumbly on the inside and crusty on the outside. So 1.5 cups of bread flour, just the higher protein content. Bread flour is awesome to use for things like baguettes because it makes strong baguettes. Okay, a cup of lukewarm water. This is filtered water. It's cold, so I'm going to put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds or less to just get it warm. And what I mean by lukewarm is you stick your pinky in there, it feels a little warm to your pinky but not hot. So this is just warm water, and it actually only took 26 seconds in my microwave to get it to where it felt a little warm to my pinky. So that goes in as well. We will put in a half a teaspoon of salt. Keep in mind there's some salt in the olives. Normally we would put in about a teaspoon of salt. We back off of the salt a little bit because of the olives. We're going to do a teaspoon of onion powder. So there will be a wonderful back flavor. Once you get past the olive flavor, there will be an onion flavor that sort of pops in there too. So, teaspoon of onion powder. And a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And with the exception of the olives, we have put all the ingredients in our bread as of right now. That's how fast and easy that is. I love that. We're going to use a spatula, and we're just going to kind of mush it around a little bit to let the yeast start to work. Okay, so we're going to give it a head start. Olives are salty. Salt stops yeast from working so well, so we're going to give this yeast a couple of minutes of a head start, 5 minutes or so, before we actually start running our dough hook and our stand mixer. See, that's just, and you can smell it already. Yeast mixed with all those ingredients. Okay. You can see that bread flour is already starting to work. Do you see how it's starting to clump together like that?
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for in a good bread. So we've left this sit for a good 5 minutes just to let the yeast get started. And because we live in a dry area, I may end up having to add extra water or flour to it. We'll see how it looks once the dough hook gets started. Now I'm going to run it with the dough hook for a couple of minutes and then add the olives and run it a little longer. Oh yeah, let's add the olives in because there's a little bit of olive juice in the bottom of this container, and that might be enough liquid to get this to come together well. A little sticky. That's okay. The good thing about bread dough is you can always add liquid or flour as you need it to just get the right consistency. And what you want is a soft dough that isn't dry, but that isn't sticking to your hands either. I gotta tell you, I think we're close.
Olive pizza dough would probably be really good.
I'll bet. I bet this would make an excellent pizza dough if I rolled it out thin enough. Well, that sounds really good.
We should try that.
We should try that. That's an excellent idea. I think we're good. Let's see what we've got here. Oh yeah, that is a nice dough. So let me push my mixer out of the way. We've got all the olives in one spot here. We don't want that. So let me do a little bit of kneading by hand Just to get this, you don't want to overwork it, but you want the olives spread more evenly in the dough. Okay. Oh, I can smell those olives in there. It smells wonderful. All we're doing is pressing the dough down, rolling it back up over itself, turning, doing it again. And it's still a little sticky right there. Okay. Beautiful. And I got a loose olive occasionally. I'm gonna just make him go back in there. Okay. Beautiful. So, we will put this in a bowl. I'm going to drizzle a little olive oil in the bowl. Okay, smooth side down, roll it around a little bit, flip it over. I have a bread proving button on my stove. If you don't have a bread proving button, put your dough in a bowl, a little olive oil and a lid. Turn your oven on to 400, let it heat up, and then turn it off. And set your bowl with the lid, with the dough in it, near the vent of your oven. And that'll provide a slightly warm place for your dough to get big. It's easy for me because I have a proving button in my oven, so I just stick it in my oven. But I didn't have one for a long time, so I would just heat up the oven, turn it off, and let the bread rise near it. When we were living in Germany, I had a wood stove in the first house we lived in Germany back in the 90s. We also had a heating system. The wood stove was just for extra heat. And in the fall and winter on cold days, I would get a little wood fire going, and I would prove the bread near the wood fire. It was a little house we had way out in the hills away from the base when we were stationed in Germany the first time. We want this to double in size, so we're going to leave it in there for 60 minutes and then check it. Okay, while our bread is proving in the oven, let's start cutting up the vegetables for the rest of our Gasthaus meal tonight. So we're going to do some cut up onions first. We will add the green peppers and red peppers together in one of these bowls. The big bowl here is for squash, and then we've got tomatoes. So let's do onions first and put them in this one. And I'm going to play you guys some music while I cut, of course. The onions, green pepper, and squash all came from a company I order from that's trying to reduce food waste in the country. These are all organically grown vegetables. The onions, peppers, and squash. They were, for some reason, not good enough for the grocery store. They look just fine to me. These are a little puckered on top, but I want the organic farmers to be rewarded for creating these without chemicals. And it doesn't matter to me if they're not pristine like at the grocery store. The flavor is awesome, and I'm rescuing these from the landfill. So a lot of the fresh stuff you see me use and the fruit comes from Misfits Market. There are several companies out there that are doing this. That's the one that I use, in case you're interested. There's nothing wrong with these, and I get them cheaper than at the grocery store. And they get delivered right to my house. I love that. So I thought I'd plug for them. I'll send them the link to the video. They're not paying me to make that announcement for them, but I am kind of happy with their service, so I thought I'd mention it. This is stuff that would have ended up in the landfill. Instead, it's going to end up in my dinner, our Gasthaus dinner. A lot of this produce is farm oriented. It comes in needing to be washed or cleaned up. It's all organic or mostly organic. And it reminds me of the food in Germany, doesn't it? When we used to eat at the Gasthaus there. Because you get dishes created with whatever the seasonal produce was. Take a serrated knife and cut the center out of the tomatoes before I slice them. There you go, like a little diamond shape, cone shape. Then all the hard pieces are already out of there. And you can just slice it up. There you go. We're going to actually put all of these except for the tomatoes into the wok with a little olive oil, salt and pepper, and then maybe even a little basil before we actually make the piles on the tray to go under the broiler. While we're waiting for the bread to finish proving, let's go ahead and cut up the apple and orange we're going to include on the table tonight. So there will be roasted vegetables covered in goat cheese, fresh olive bread, and a little bit of a fruit tray. And that'll be our meal tonight. I'm looking forward to it, actually. The orange and apple also came from Misfits Market. And I will cover this over so the apples don't turn brown before we're ready to eat them. Well, that'll be pretty on the table. Well, there's half. Get in there. I have some leftover grapes there. I'm trying to finish some of those up tonight. All right. There's that part. Get up there. See if this is a good orange, would you?
Taste tester?
Mm-hmm. Sweet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. There's our fruit tray. Let's see what we got. Oh, yes. We have some beautiful, beautiful olive bread. You smell that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna punch it down. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Freshly washed hands.
Yep.
Punching the air out of it with my knuckles. God, it smells good. Okay, it smells really good. Okay, so we roll it up on itself. Look at this beautiful olive loaf we've got here. And I'm actually gonna roll it in the other direction too. Here we go. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Get in there. No olives can get... This one too. I want to close it up. What I don't want is big pieces of olive sticking out in the oven because they'll burn easier than the rest of the bread will. So I want to make this bread soft and cover up some of the olives that are in there. I might turn it in the other direction again. There we go. Yeah. See how I've sort of gotten most of them inside the bread? Get there. Little pieces sticking out is fine. We don't want huge ones. Okay. Get in there. All right. I think we've gotten it. This is our loaf of olive bread with a little bit of flour for that rustic look. Okay. And I honestly think that helps the olives to dust it a little bit. Okay. I'm going to put it here. This is for our final rise. I'm going to turn my oven on to 400. And I'm going to take this serrated knife. I'm going to make some nice 1/2 inch deep cuts across the bread. This helps when it's trying to rise. About the size of a blanket. I'm going to cover this. Okay. I've got it mostly sealed around the edges. Now, we're going to let that rise for another 1/2 hour at the edge of the oven while the oven heats up to 400 degrees. And this is 400 degrees whether it's a gas oven or an electric oven, and the reason for that is we're actually putting 1/2 cup of cold water in a tray underneath this bread as it cooks. Oh my. Nice and big and pretty. So this little beastie goes in the oven on a center shelf. Underneath that, while it was heating up, I put a tray on one layer down, and I will pour 1/2 cup of cold water on that tray right after I stick this in the oven and close the whole thing up. That half a cup of water will help create the crust on this bread. So let's do that. Just a little underneath, and we're going to give it 30 minutes at 400 degrees. Okay, I've got some olive oil here. What we're going to do is pre-cook the veggies a little before we stick them under the broiler with the goat cheese on top. So I've drizzled my wok. You can just use a big frying pan. You don't need a wok. I've drizzled my wok with some olive oil. In goes the peppers. Let me turn this on. Medium to medium high heat. In goes the peppers first. Okay. And we will put the onions in on top. Alright. And on top of the onions, which I'm going to spread out a little bit here, we will put both squashes. When this cooks down a little bit, and I go to mix this up, I can already hear it starting to sizzle. It's going to partially cook our vegetables, so that way when they go under the broiler, they can finish cooking underneath the cheese, and we don't have raw vegetables with our dinner. Salt, a little bit of basil, and my choice of basil is just my choice. You could use oregano, you could use tarragon, you can use garlic if you want garlic. I don't want any of that. I want some basil, salt, and peppercorn. Fresh ground pepper. You can hear it already sizzling underneath there. Okay. And more olive oil over the top. Okay. 2 spatulas. Wanting to see what it looks like under there. I dig down. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. What I want is a little hole in the center. Do you see the liquid coming out of the veggies? Mm-hmm. I want that to cook off, because I'm looking for that sear. So, hole in the center. I think they're broiler ready. So I'm just going to turn this off and let them cool off a little bit. Here we have our Kalamata olive bread. Can you smell that? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'm gonna dig in.
But I do want to show the bottom. It has that nice color on it. And you hear that? If you can tap your bread and it sounds hollow, it's done. So we're going to sit this on the rack to cool. And we will slice it before we actually eat our veggies. And what we like to do is actually take the veggies and goat cheese and pile it on the bread and eat it. It's really good that way. We have our roasted veggies cooked a little. Right? So now I will make 3 piles on my cookie sheet that I've covered over in aluminum foil. Okay. And what I have to do is kind of make skinny piles, because I want to pile some tomatoes up next to them. Okay. We'll just keep doing this until we have all of the veggies handled. This might be a little bit too much veg. We'll see. There might be leftovers. I don't hear you complaining.
No, not one bit.
Put a little more on that one.
Put that little bit on the ends of the middle one.
Yeah. Ends of the middle one and a little in the middle of this one. When we would get this at the Gasthaus, they would bring a big plate and it would just have the veggies scattered across it with the goat cheese on the top and a big piece of bread on the side. It was beautiful. Let's see if I can get a hold of these. Get in there. No waste. We're good. What I do is take probably this one. Go. Isn't it pretty?
Yeah.
I can always add in more. I just want to get a nice even line for each row. We want some big pepper. We don't want much salt because there's already salt in the veggies, but we do want a little sprinkling. Okay. And then tomato's best friend, tarragon. They're meant to be together. Come on. There we go. Here we go. Beautiful. This is going to be way too much food for 3 people.
Want to bet?
Well, don't overeat. We could have leftovers tomorrow. Okay. And see, if it's a big chunk, I want to crumble it down a little bit. There we go. And I don't even mind if it goes on the tomatoes a little. There's always tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. Let me turn the broiler on. The oven's been hot because of the bread, so the broiler should heat up pretty quick before we put this in. Do you want to?
Yes.
Do
Mm-hmm. I'll take that.
This tray will go under the broiler for 5 to 10 minutes, and it'll depend on your broiler and how close it is to your broiler, but check it. I mean, put it in for 5, check it, maybe put it in for another 5. I'll show you when it's done. There you have it.
Yum.
With the steam coming off. That was a good 12 minutes under my broiler. But you can see the goat cheese doesn't really melt and spread out. Kind of stays where it is. It gets very soft, and it gets these little brown spots over the top. It is wonderful done under the broiler. So I'm going to plate these up and then we'll show you what it looks like. We'll cut some bread. We'll show you what that looks like. And then we'll show you the table when we set it up for this beautiful meal. Thank you for joining me in Oma's Kitchen. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll upload more tasty videos soon, and a special shout out to Moon Pie and Lil Bit. Till next time.